And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network dedicated to covering IU women's basketball. I'm your host tonight, Kathy Amos, and I'm joined today with my co host, Jeff Marlow. Today, we are going to give a recap of the IU women's record setting season where they finished with a 28-4 record. But let's start this show the way we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And gang, tonight, our banner moment for me came last Tuesday on March 21st, the day after the season ended with a loss to Miami at the NCAA tournament. And while that might sound weird to be talking about our banner moment coming almost immediately following the loss, I think it was really an all day kind of banner moment for us on Twitter. This was because if you were on Twitter and you watched, there was post after post after post coming out showing a huge outpouring of love and appreciation for Grace Berger, who had officially played her last game as a Hoosier. Grace gave 5 years of her life to IU basketball, coming to us from Louisville. So for our banner moment, I think we should continue our appreciation of Grace with a short recap of her career. So as a freshman, Grace played all 34 games and started 5 of them. She averaged 5.5 points per game her first year, and every year after that, she started every game that she ended up playing in. She finished her career scoring 12.4 points per game for her career average and a total of 1,841 points. She averaged 3.9 assists over her career for a total of 573 assists. And she led the Hoosiers to 3 back-to-back NCAA appearances. But I think more important than any of those numbers is the lasting difference Grace made to the program, her teammates, and the fans. And this was all shown at all of the love that everybody showed her on Twitter the day after her last game. She will always be remembered as one of the all-time greatest to put on an IU jersey and will always be a Hoosier. So thank you to Grace. And as always, our banner moment is sponsored by Home Field Apparel. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products for schools in their existing lines, so you're bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear. And March Madness is still going on, so keep your eyes out for even more new stuff coming out. And not only do you get quality apparel, but you're supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelley School of Business. So go to homefieldapparel.com, use our promo code HOME, HOME, for 15% off if it's your first order. Again, that promo code is HOME for 15% off. The website, homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. So, Jeff, I'll just give a quick blurb on a few other headlines that have come out since the last time we talked last week. So, continuing on with Grace Berger, she did, as expected, officially entered the draft, with it being her last year. Not to forget Alyssa Geary, it was also her last game as an IU Hoosier. Mona Zarek and Keandra Brown entered the transfer portal, and some attendance numbers started to come out. And through the door, total attendance for home games for the entire season this year was 145,868 attendance, which dwarfed the previous high of 86,149 and is most likely to be a top 5 in the country. All right, next we'll kick it over to Coach Marlow for Coach's Corner. So, Jeff, what are your initial thoughts about any of the headlines or anything else that's on your mind related to Indiana basketball?
I'm going to kind of piggyback off of your banner moment, and also realize that the last 3 seasons, Grace took us to the NCAA tournament. She was also part of a team that went in 19 as well as a freshman, and then they would have made it in 20. So obviously we wouldn't have got the 5th year without the COVID situation. So we got to enjoy an extra year of Grace Berger that normally we wouldn't get. And I think that's one of the things that you're going to see as we go through the next couple seasons are players that we're finally going to be out of this. Do they have a COVID year left? We're really getting to that point. I think next year may actually end up being the last year that there are people with a COVID year left. Maybe the year after. I've lost a little bit of track, but it's going to wind down, is what I'm saying. But I think what you're going to talk about with Grace Berger, and again, for those who don't know and listen on the podcast, and last year we had the Grace Berger show, and I co-hosted that with Grace. When you have the discussion about greatest players in Indiana women's basketball history, If Grace is not at the top of the list, she is certainly going to be in the discussion. You look at the points she put up, the rebounds she put up, and the assists. She did something that no women's player, and I don't think any men's player had ever done prior to her showing up on campus at IU. But it's more that's like you said, Kathy, it's more than the stats. It was the intangibles. It was the leadership. And I remember talking with her a couple different times on the Grace Berger show that she learned a lot from Allie Patberg. And Allie was kind of the one who, saw something in Grace, kind of drug her to the cook hall. And then that became the thing. And you listen to the players talk now that, kind of emotional after the game, where if I'm sure many of our fans saw Sydney Parrish talking about one of the reasons she came back to Indiana was to play with Grace Berger, the fact that Grace was here. So I think that leadership is something that's going to really be missing when we get into talking about next year. And we're not going to do that for a while. But when we really get into talking about next year, I think one of the things we're going to want to know is who is going to be that leader. And it wasn't just so much leadership. Grace Berger wanted the ball at crunch time. We saw that time and time and time again throughout her career. And 98% of the time, she was successful at crunch time by either making a play or finding somebody or getting the shot or making a play to get somebody else open. And unfortunately for her, it just didn't work out in the game against Miami. She had the ball. She got in the lane. That's a shot that she's hit many, many times. But I think that you were spot on with the banner moment that when we look back, Grace Berger is going to be in that discussion for greatest player in the history of IU women's basketball. And I think that's going to go on. And even Terry Morin said that recruiting Grace Berger was a huge get for them back in the day. And I think it proved out that Grace Berger, who may not have been a top 20 recruit on a rating, but proved that she was quite possibly one of the 10 most important recruits in her senior class for the school that got her, especially. So, and so I wanted to kind of piggyback off that. I will say this, I was not surprised by Zarek or Brown being in the portal already. I think
agree.
Zarek had not got much time in her 2 years. Brown had fought some injuries here the last couple years, but I think Lily Meister had kind of taken those minutes. And I think going into next year, Lily was going to continue to get more of those minutes. So I think that's something that, Keandra probably saw, and she wanted to get some more playing time. Hopefully she will get healthy. That was the one bad thing about this year. She never really got healthy to really give us some of the contribution we thought we might get from her. But she was but again, another great teammate. I think that's the one thing you can say about these players who have come through the last 4 or 5 years, and especially who have now graduated over the last couple of years. Great teammates. And I think that's something that the staff looks for. And I think that's something they will continue to look for.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with those sentiments. And, back to Grace and her leadership, just I was looking back as I was preparing for the show tonight, and I was looking back at our Game Ball and Hustle Awards. And, Grace ended up winning 8 Game Ball Awards and 4.5 Hoosier Hustle Awards. The interesting thing for me was of those 8, Grace got 5 of them out of our last 6 games. So it was something where, especially as, Mac got her knee kind of banged up again and we needed somebody else to step up. Grace was always there. And that leadership, I thought, really shone down the end of the stretch. So absolutely nothing ever. Nope, go ahead.
No, I just want to say, for those watching on the YouTube live feed and for Phil and the Workaholics, you're right, Phil. I shouldn't say it just as a women's basketball player. She is going to go down as one of the great IU basketball players in history, regardless of gender. So, Phil, thank you for pointing that out in the Workaholics.
Absolutely. So, all right, well, let's move on then to the topic of our show tonight, which is to recap the season. So I thought this was timely to do it as soon as, we could, even though the tournament's still going on and that sting from Miami is still there. And I thought it was good to just go back and, for me, at least, it was a bit cathartic to go back and relook at the season, right? Just looking at that record, 28-4. I just want us all to remember that it was a season as a whole. It wasn't just the one game. against Miami at the end. So I thought it was really timely for us to do this and just remember as a whole what the season meant to the whole program and how wonderful it really was, and what a fun ride it was. So we'll kind of break it down into some non-conference, some conference, and then some our postseason games. So we'll just quickly touch on the first three non-conference games. The first one was actually an exhibition against Kentucky Wesleyan, who we beat 86 to 43, opening the regular season at home against Vermont with a win of 86 to 49, and then at home again against UMass Lowell, where we won 93 to 37. So, Jeff, anything that you can remember about those games that kind of jumped out to you? The one for me is the Vermont game, where it was kind of Garzon's kind of introduction to us as a freshman, and she ended up getting our game ball, and she shot something like 5 of 8 from 3-point and was like 19 points. So that was really our first introduction, I thought, to Garzon and what kind of player she could be for us in the future. But beyond that, is there anything else for Vermont or UMass or the exhibition too?
No, they went about as expected. I think we were all figuring that those games were going to be wins, and it was really everybody was waiting for that next game. They were going to go on the road to Tennessee, go to Knoxville, and play what everybody thought was going to be a very good Tennessee team, especially in the preseason.
Yeah. So Tennessee, we'll just quickly move on to that. They did go down to Tennessee at the time. Tennessee was ranked 11, excuse me, at the time. They were just coming off that loss to Ohio State. They might have had a game in between there, but that was that game where Tennessee was just up by double digits against Ohio State. And then Ohio State really started pressing them at half and then came back and beat Tennessee. And then we went down to Tennessee, and yes, they were ranked 11th at the time. And we won that game 79 to 67 on the road in front of a almost 8,000 person crowd. But what else stands out to you from that Tennessee game?
Well, like you said, Ohio State had already beaten them, and it kind of exposed a little bit of their guards. But I think what Ohio State showed in that game was that when they were healthy, their pressure and their ability to create offense from their defense was going to be something people struggled with. And they showed that in the NCAA tournament as well. And a lot of that was because J.C. Sheldon got healthy. When we played them, and we're going to talk a little bit later, so I'll save that, I guess. But but we got a little lucky down at Knoxville because either the best or second best player for Tennessee did not play that night. She was battling an injury, so that helped. But that was a game we got out to a double-digit lead. And I want to say we came out in the third, I think it was the third quarter, got off to a really slow second half start, which kind of became a little bit of a theme at times throughout the first half of the season, where we get leads and then kind of have a sluggish third quarter. And then Grace Berger put us on her back, and she made plays. And when that happened, then Indiana was able to stretch the lead back out. And, you get out of Knoxville with a 12-point win, I'll take that any day of the week. It's maybe the way it happened because we'd been up double digits, lost that lead. I want to say Tennessee came all the way back and tied it. And then, like I said, Grace made plays, and we won by 12 going away. And I think, that was when I think everybody realized that this team had something a little bit special, because there was a little bit more offensive firepower than we'd had with the previous team or two. And it was going to come from different places, but we still had that player in Grace Berger to make plays down when we needed them.
Yeah, agreed. And to your point with the third quarter, that was the only quarter that they outscored us, although it wasn't by much, but they did outscore us 20 to 17. And yes, Grace got her game ball in that game, testament again to her toughness. And she had a double-double in that with 13 points and 10 rebounds. And of course, then 6 assists as well. So, yeah, really just a great game, I thought, all around. And that was just an interesting, I think, test for us as a team, because we didn't know what we were getting with all the new players and how they were going to gel. And I think that was our first introduction to the fact that, we've been hearing in the offseason how much the team had bonded. I think we saw that on the court down in Tennessee that night.
Yep.
Okay, well, moving on then to the next set of games, then I'll just kind of group them together in the next four. So we had Bowling Green at home, where we won 96-61. We had Quinnipiac at home, where we won 92-55. Then we went on the road to that Las Vegas International Invitational game. So we had Auburn 96-81 that we won, and then Memphis 79-64. The point here, and I think in this 4-game stretch, it was the Auburn game, which is where Grace got hurt. So that was probably the big headline of those 4. But what else sticks out to you in those 4 games?
Well, Grace getting hers is the big headline, but the bigger headline was what a fiasco that whole thing in Las Vegas turned out to be. They thought they were getting a different facility they were going to be playing in. They ended up basically in a ballroom at a hotel with not a very good situation. And unfortunately, your best player gets hurt. Now, she could have got hurt in any other setting. I mean, I'm not blaming the setting per se for her injury, because it was just one of those collision type injuries, but it was not what they thought they'd signed on to. And I think that they, along with other teams, were very disappointed and thought that, and it got it to a certain degree, Kathy, and I want to get your opinion on this. It was that you just got that feeling that they treated it like women's basketball and thought they should just be happy being in Las Vegas. And that's not where the women's game is now. The women's game expects to have facilities as equal to what a men's tournament would, or a men's shootout, whatever you want to call it, would have had in Las Vegas.
Yeah, absolutely. And, hopefully they've gotten the message this year with attendance numbers up, viewing numbers are up. I don't want to get into other teams and other thing. That's not the purpose of the show, but, I'm hearing tickets for the women's NCAA Final Four are actually selling for higher than the men's right now. The viewership on that last Iowa Louisville game was actually higher than any NBA game that ESPN had viewership up. So hopefully, outlets are starting to get the picture that, this isn't just women's basketball, just in quotes for those of you not watching. It is a lot more. It's growing in popularity and it's growing in viewership, and you have to start giving that the respect that it deserves. So yes, it felt like it was just an afterthought for whoever put that on.
The star quality helps. I mean, and I know people don't want to hear it on this broadcast, but Caitlin Clark draws viewers. But she's not the only one. Paige Beckers was drawing viewers before she got hurt. There are others. Aaliyah Boston is drawing viewers. There are a lot of there are stars now in the women's game, more so than we've seen in the past. There's always been the Diana Taurasi. There's always been that UConn special kid along with that. But there's more teams with more stars now. And you take a look, we'll talk a little bit about, Ohio State in a little bit, but Cody McMahon is a star, and they're going to start drawing more viewers in. And I think it helps, Kathy, again, kind of your opinion, but when you see NBA players that will tweet about watching the women's game and how much respect they have for watching the women's college game, it's different. They'll admit that it's not playing above the rim, but that they appreciate and respect what the women are doing in terms of the things they do on the court, the fundamentals they play with, and some of the concepts. We saw this from the IU men's team. They borrowed a kind of a staple play from Terry Moore. And so the game is growing, and it's going to continue to grow. And I think partially because more and more teams have stars. The girl Seagrass from Villanova draws people to watch. When you put up 50, people are going to see it. And I think that's, and we're seeing that with the ratings. We're seeing that with the attendance numbers.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You see all kinds of tweets, and oh my gosh, I mean, if you watch any of the women's games too, anybody who says that women's college basketball is not physical has never watched one of their games. They may not dunk, although there have been dunks in games, but it's rare. It's very rare. You're probably not going to see any dunks. But if you want to see a lot of hard-nosed basketball with a lot of these high-end teams right now, and the parity is getting there too, right? I mean, we had 2 number 1 seeds not even make it to the Final Four, which is very unusual.
Didn't make it to the Sweet 16.
The Sweet at 16. Thank you. Yes, I was trying to correct myself there, and which was, I think, the first time ever. And you're starting to see a lot more parity now. It's going to take a while to get to where the men's game is in terms of, we had a lot more parity obviously in the men's side this year, but the men's side used to be that way as well. Right. Yep. And so we're getting there, and I think it's going to take some time, but I think the growth this year from women's basketball in terms of popularity, the product they're putting on the court, and the fact that people are starting to open their eyes and watching it more, I think is just a big testament to that. And I don't think we'll ever see anything like that in Vegas again. I really hope not anyway.
I hope not either. And I will say this. I think, I'm a huge Geno fan. I respect everything Geno RM has done at UConn and what he has built. But one of the best things that happened to the women's game this year was UConn getting beat in the Sweet 16. And Ohio State did it easily. It was really not a close game. Now, again, UConn had injuries. Fudd wasn't probably 100%. Paige Beckers didn't play all year. But I think it helps the growth of the game is what I mean by it. I'm saying I'm glad UConn lost because I'm a UConn hater, but it helps with that what you're talking about. It gives the perception that there's more parity in the game. And I think there is. UConn hasn't won a title since what they say 2016, but it's the first time they haven't been to the it's the first time they haven't been to the Final Four since 2007. So I think it helps the game grow when a team like UConn isn't the one sucking all the oxygen.
Right. And then not just UConn, Tennessee was like that for a while. So that's the other fun fact. Then we'll move on to the North Carolina game. Yep. This is only the third time ever since the women's expanded NCAA tournament, third time ever that either Tennessee or UConn hasn't been in the Final Four. Only the third time. So to your point. Okay, North Carolina. So we go at home now, do the ACC Big Ten Challenge, and North Carolina comes to town. This was on December 1st. At the time, North Carolina is ranked 6th, and we beat them 87-63. So what do you remember about that North Carolina game that sticks out to you, Jeff?
That we look like a top 5 team. Everybody thought North Carolina coming in was going to be the beast in the ACC, that they were going to be the best team. And obviously it was set up to be a very good matchup. It was the night after the men had played North Carolina. So you had another good crowd. But we really won that game going away. It really kind of was not only showcased all the other town around, but if I remember right, Mackenzie Holmes really just dominated in the post that night. And really it was kind of the national coming out party for Mackenzie, if I remember right.
Yeah. So let me look here. Mackenzie Holmes, yes, ended up with 25 points. I think for me, what sticks out, actually, we gave Sydney Parrish our game ball, and that's because she ended up with 24 points. And that was a fantastic game from Sydney that we ended up giving that to her. But yes, Mackenzie also 25 points right there. It was just another all around team effort. You had 2 other players that were in double digits, and one with Yarden Garzon, who was just 1 point away. So that showed the balance of our team. And one thing we had always were curious about, I think, as well, coming into the season was what the team was going to look like on offense. We knew defense was going to be the calling card. We weren't sure about offense. And here they do come in, put up 87 points on a number 6 ranked North Carolina team. And I think that kind of opened our eyes as well to say, hey, I think this team is not just good defensively, they're good offensively too, and we need to watch out.
And that was that first big game without Grace, because Grace was going to miss after the Auburn game. She's going to miss 8 games in a row. And there were a lot of questions coming into that I remember there were a lot of questions coming in that North Carolina game was, could we handle that kind of team being down one of your best players? Because the year before, when Mackenzie had been hurt, we hadn't been able to overcome that against a good team. And now that was the question. And we showed that without Grace, would be nice to have her, but we showed that, like you said, Sydney Parrish, Sarah Scalia, the others, they all stepped up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and in there, Chloe Mermeal got her Hustle Award. So, next we played Illinois and Penn State. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about in those 2 games. We ended up winning both of those. Illinois game at home, 65-61.
That Illinois game ended up being a lot closer than it should have been. That was tied. That game basically came down to the wire. And that's when we kind of realized Illinois was going to be a much better team than they had been the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's where I was trying to go.
Sorry.
So yes, that's okay. It's okay. It happens. So not much to say other than the fact that Illinois was way tighter than we were expecting, right? I think Illinois last year won only something like 4 games. And they ended up ranked for a little while this year. So that Illinois game in particular opened our eyes, especially being at home, that we just have to be careful with whoever we're playing. So Penn State, we beat them 67-58. That was up at Penn State. So nothing real exciting to say about that one.
Not our best game. Not our best game.
No,
we got out of there with a win.
We got the win.
Yep.
Yeah, on the road. So we got our first road win for Big Ten. So, and then we wrapped up the non-conference game at home against our non-conference season at home against Morehead State, 87-24. talk about some defense in that game. And then Butler, we beat them as well, 67-50. Anything else that you want to talk about before we get into the heart of the Big Ten Conference?
Well, I'm trying to remember. I don't think I watched that Morehead State game live, and I'm kind of glad I didn't. I know
Yeah.
our defense I know it looks good defensively, and I'm sure our defense had something to do with it. But I'm going to quote Kim Mulkey: "That's some bad basketball."
Yeah.
When you're only scoring 24 points, make your layups, make your free throws.
Yeah.
But still, we were going to win that game. Those were games we were expected to win.
Yeah, absolutely. Then our last game of 2022 was unfortunately our first loss here in the regular season, which was against Michigan State. So that was up on the road in East Lansing, and we lost that one 78-83. And that's the game where I think we really definitely felt the loss of Grace Berger. I know we felt it, the close game against Illinois for sure, but this was when we definitely missed her in that game and with our first loss. But anything else you remember from that Michigan State game that you want to kind of touch on? The other thing that stuck out to me, I think, was that the game we had like a kabillion turnovers.
Yep. Turned it over a ton, didn't rebound worth a darn. And it was really the first time where I felt, looking back on it, that Michigan State game was one where you got a little bit of the sense that penetrating guards, athletic guards could give us a problem. And it showed up at State. Now, I think we could have overcome it if we don't turn it over like 26 times.
21. There we go. I just pulled it up. 21 turnovers. Not by much. Yeah, 21 turnovers for us. We had 25 rebounds to their 26. So, but it should have been a lot more lopsided in our favor if you look at the talent we had compared to them. So, oh yeah, thanks Kirkwood Avenue News in our chat as well. 21 turnovers. Yes. So 21 turnovers. The only thing that I think was good there is Mackenzie Holmes really tried to put us on her back, and she ended up with 32 points in that game. But boy, when you just turn it over that much, that's just something hard to overcome, I think. Yeah. Anything else on the Michigan State game?
No, except that they were going to be a pain in the butt later on.
Yes, they were. Foreshadowing. Okay, so I'll group the next kind of two games together here. So first is Nebraska that we had to go into overtime at home to beat on January 1st. We won that one 74-62. And then we had the Northwestern game, and that one was important. That was up in Northwestern, but Grace came back and ended up playing 27 minutes, scored 16 points, and had 5 assists. Anything in either of those two games besides those 2 points that kind of jump out to you?
Well, the Nebraska game at home was a game that I really felt was a tough game going in because Nebraska had some size and really felt like they might give us some issue. And that game ends up going to overtime. We end up winning by 12, but that's 12. That's a 12-point victory basically in overtime. And so again, another tough game down the stretch. And that was going to be really the last game without Grace Berger. We didn't quite know at the time. We'd been hearing some rumblings after the Michigan State game that she was getting closer and closer to being ready. And we were a little bit surprised. There'd been some kind of unfounded rumors, but been some rumors out of Bloomington that perhaps she was going to play in the Nebraska game. And then she didn't, and we all kind of started thinking, maybe she's still another week away or so. But then when we got to Northwestern, she's there. She played. I think we were all a little surprised how many minutes she played because I think we all thought she was going to be on a little bit of a minutes restriction coming back. But, as it went along, she really didn't seem to have any minutes restriction. So with that, but yeah, those two games, I just want to point out that Nebraska game was an overtime game.
Yeah. And the thing with the Nebraska one that actually I think really won it. So we went to overtime, ended up winning by 12. And that's because we outscored Nebraska 12-0 in that overtime period. So if we remember, we held Nebraska to no points in overtime. So again, defense kind of coming back and helping us with that game. Okay. So then after the Nebraska game and then Northwestern, we then go on home against Maryland, who was at the time ranked number 9th, and we won that 68-61. Anything you want to touch on specifically with that Maryland game that jumps out to you? This is the one at home.
Well, we only played them the one time. That was the thing. That's what made that game so big. Because
That's
at
right.
the time, we thought Maryland would be a team we were going to be battling with all the way to the end for possibly a conference title. And that one game might, since you're only playing them once, that's a tiebreaker. And so that you really wanted to get that game. And IU again continued to play well against Maryland. It was a nip and tuck game for the most part. Indiana played pretty well. We made plays, but it was what I thought was going to be. It was a good, pretty much a top 10 battle like we thought would play out. I think it helped that we were at home. We had a pretty good crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that game, I think we were led again by Sydney Parrish with 18 points in that game, and Mackenzie Holmes right after that with 15. So, all right, continuing on then, after we played Maryland at home, we had Wisconsin come in and played them at home, and we won 93-56. And then we went on the road and played Illinois. And that was when Illinois was ranked 24th or 21st, depending on whatever you would like to pick for your rankings. And then we won that one on the road 83-72. Anything jump out to either of those two games? Maybe the Illinois game?
Just going to Illinois, because after we played them the first time and they had beaten Iowa, I think the week before in Champaign. So it was one of those that you had to take Illinois seriously, and the team went in there and they got the W, and it didn't matter, but it was by 1, by 11, whatever it was going to be. It was just the fact you had to go on the road to Illinois at that point and get a win. And they did.
Yeah. Yeah, in that game, again, we were led by Mackenzie and Grace. So we had given our game ball to Mackenzie and our hustle were to Grace. So Mackenzie in that game scored 30 points for us. So just a monster game out of Mackenzie, which is kind of what we would have expected the first time around. Okay, then after Illinois, we go on the road now to Michigan, and maybe we'll group the next two together. So we had two really back-to-back games that were really tough, right? So we had, we're on January 23rd, we go up to Ann Arbor to Michigan, who is ranked 14th, won that one 92-83, and then come back home 3 days later and play Ohio State, who is ranked second, and we beat them 78-65. So what jumps out to those games from your memory?
I'm trying to pull up the box score. Here we go. Pulled up the box score. I'm trying to remember.
Me too.
It's coming up now.
Sarah.
Come here. First of all, Sarah Scalia, lights out. Sarah Scalia, yes. That was really that first game in a long time. She had struggled through kind of the middle of December through that middle part of January, and she played 23 minutes, hit 3 of 5 from beyond the arc, 7 of 10 overall, finished up with 19 points, and really was a huge part of that game. In a game where we really were in control for the most part. We led by 10 at the end of the first quarter. We were up 10 at the half. We were up 12 at the end of the third quarter. They made a little bit of a run in the fourth quarter, but we get out of there with a 9-point win. I was ecstatic because I thought Michigan, even though they had some injuries, they still had enough firepower, and being on the road up there really worried me. And we got out of there playing well. Mackenzie finishes up with 25 and 10. You had 1, 2, 3, 4. You had 6 players in double figures.
6 players in double figures.
Yeah. So, that's that game. And then we get Ohio State in that next game. I'm going to kind of piggyback into that as well, Kathy. And I'll let you kind of follow up on the Ohio State game as well.
The third quarter.
But that's the game, though, where we do get the benefit of that third quarter. I'm trying to pull it up here. My computer.
Yeah, we held them to 6 points. 6-27 in that third quarter. So 27 points for us, 6 for them. In that third quarter, we just blew it open. So at the half, it was 36-38. So a 2-point game, and then just blew the doors off of them in that third quarter.
We were down. We were down at the half. It was 36.
Did I do the bad math?
It was 36-32. We were down.
I did bad math.
So we were down.
It's a good thing I'm not an accountant anymore.
But like I said, we go off on a 27-6 run. But the other thing with that, though, is you had 12 points, 11 rebounds from Sydney Parrish, and with that, now again, we benefited from the fact that they did not have a healthy J.C. Sheldon in that game, and I think as we saw,
she's coming back, by the way.
Yes,
she's using her COVID year and coming back next year. So
and that doesn't surprise me really, but I think we saw once you got to the Big Ten tournament, once we saw in the NCAA tournament, a healthy J.C. Sheldon made Ohio State a completely different team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we benefited from that. I'm looking here, So
Yeah,
like I said, and
McKenzie
then
had 26 in that game.
yep.
Yeah.
So
And were they missing Shaklaya Nova as well that game? No, that's the game she came back, but only played like 17 minutes. So, okay.
yeah, and she didn't play. Yeah, she didn't play well
No,
either, if I
3
remember right.
points, 17, there's 17 minutes and only 3 points. So,
Right.
yeah, Mac definitely just shined in that game again. 26 points for McKenzie. She had our game ball on that, and Sydney had our hustle award. Sydney ended up with 12 points in that game, but 11 rebounds and 4 assists in that game. I remember watching that. Actually, I was in Hawaii during both of those games, but I still recorded them and watched them in my hotel room. So, yeah, just that was a lot of fun. Actually, even though I didn't watch it live. Anything else on either of those games, the Michigan or Ohio State game?
No, except I was, I think the one thing we saw was that Cody McMahon was the real deal, and she deserved to be freshman of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a lot of fun watching her in the tournament too. She's going to be fun to watch the next, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have Rutgers 91-68. We go up to Minneapolis to play Minnesota 4 and go to a arena. Purdue 69-46. So maybe want to concentrate just a little bit on that Purdue game. So in that Purdue game, we had Chloe Moore McNeil, who got our game ball, and Sydney Parrish, who got our hustle award. And I just remember Chloe just being an absolute animal in that game.
What I remember is Sydney Parrish looking at the student section at Purdue and giving it that little like,
Quiet.
that's like, I'm like, that's an Indiana player on the road at Mackey Arena. But that's another one. But remember, we talked about kind of through the early part of the season, the non-conference schedule, they struggled in the third quarters a lot of times. Or at least had some sluggish starts. They go there, they're up 31 to 20, they're up 31-26 at the half, and then they come out and they just explode on Purdue, and we all loved it. I know I did.
Yes.
19
it was a lot of fun.
19-2 third quarter. A 38-20 second half, rolled over your biggest rival on their own floor, and just exactly what every IU fan wants in that game. And like you said, we had 4 players in double figures. Another game where Sarah Scalia came off the bench and chipped in with 14 points, 4 rebounds. She was 3 of 4 on threes. So again, she was starting to kind of find. I think it took her a while. I think she had a good start to the season, and she kind of got in a slump, and then it took her a while to finally get her footing back. And she had that stretch there in January where she really was a big contributor.
Yeah, absolutely. Super glad she's confirmed again that she's coming back to Indiana next year. So happy to have Sarah coming back. So yeah, she ended up with 14 points. And again, let's just repeat it one more time. 19-2 in the third quarter. And I think that's a great note to end on for that Purdue game.
Yep.
And boy, we get to the gauntlet, right? Like we called it that when the schedule came out, and we had that February gauntlet. Now we started it here on the road with Purdue, and then we finish up, and then we'll talk about whichever game you want to go to next. Then we go at home, number 5, Iowa. We win 87-78. On the road to Ohio State, who was ranked 13th at the time, win 83-59. At home against number 12, Michigan, win 68-52. At home against Purdue, 83-60 win. And then on the road to Iowa, who is ranked 6th. And we know about the buzzer beater by Caitlin Clark. So which game do you want to start with? Do you just want to start with the first Iowa game?
Yeah, let's start with the Iowa game. Actually, I just start with the first 2, in my opinion, and just kind of lump those together. Because first of all, we saw that when the schedule came out, at home with Iowa, at Ohio State. And we figured both those 2 teams, along with Maryland, were going to be in that kind of bunch to win the league. And by that point in February, it really still was. Ohio State had lost a few. They were kind of, they were barely holding on to any hope for the race. But we could kind of put the nail in the coffin if we could go over there and win. But we had to take care of Iowa at home, because you still had to go to Iowa as well at the end of the season. And that Iowa game, nip and tuck, 39-39 at the half. It was 19-19 at the end of the first quarter. We were able to get a 5-point lead at the end of the third quarter. And then it just was, it was a battle all the way to the end, because Iowa wasn't going to go away. And we ended up outscoring them by 4 in the fourth quarter, get out of there with that 87-78 win. Mac had 24, but Grace Berger, 26 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, excuse me, one steal, and in a game where Clark had 35, we held Sonano to 2, or excuse me, we held Sonano to 6. We held Sonano to 6. She had 2 assists, but she had 6 points. So I think that was kind of the strategy they felt all along, was that, if Clark got her 30 and nobody else really could beat you. And I think that was part of what the plan was. And it worked out at least that night.
Yeah.
But that game at Ohio State went way better than I thought it was, because I thought that return game was going to be a much more 4 or 5 point game. And we ended up getting out there with a 25-point win.
Yeah, that one really was a big surprise for me. So yeah, the Iowa game, again, we Gabe Grace was getting our game ball in that one, not surprisingly, and Chloe Moore McNeil got our Hustle Award. Chloe, I thought, was just a really instrumental again. She had 11 points, almost a double-double, 11 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 assists in that Iowa game. Just a really overall nice performance from Chloe. And then the Ohio State game, JC Sheldon wasn't back still, and that their big girl was still out. She didn't play at all. I knew that she wasn't in one of the games. So she was out. 2 of their main players were completely out for Ohio State, but still didn't expect to go on the road and beat them by 24 points. That was a huge surprise to me. And, again, led by, Mackenzie Holmes with 33, but Sarah Scalia came off the bench in that game and gave us 24 points. That she just exploded, 6 of 8 3-point shooting, and shot 9 of 12 total from the field. And, that was just honestly, I think that was, in my mind, one of Sarah's best games that she had all year. I really do. So that's what sticks out to me in those 2 games. Anything else on those 2, or you want to talk about, a little bit, maybe the Michigan game?
I was going to just quickly hit the Michigan game again, a game where it allowed us to really kind of put a lock on the conference race. We still had to finish out the conference race, but that Michigan game was a game where I felt like we'd beat them up there, but they still had enough firepower. And we really, for the most part, we were up 14 at the half, and we were up 24 at the end of the third quarter. So really we're cruising along. If I remember right, though, we had a sluggish fourth quarter and kind of let them get it back into about 9 or 10, 11 in there. We all kind of felt like, but we finished out with
they outscored us by 8 in that fourth quarter. 15-7.
But at one point I want to say it was maybe like 11-2. I mean, they kind of made that little run, 12-2, something like that. And we were able to finally finish out the game, but a 68-52 win. But I'll throw it to you, just, but really the game is the Purdue game. Here's the chance to lock up a share of the conference title for the first time since 1983.
Sold out game. And the first time we sell out a game. So that was a lot of fun for a lot of reasons. Yes. So we knew we had at a minimum a share of the Big Ten title in that game.
If we win.
Yes, if we win, of course. And then and I think we won every quarter, if I remember, in that. It was just to me, it was just a great game from beginning to end. Yeah, we outscored them, except for the second quarter. They outscored us by 2, but otherwise it was 20-15 in the first, 19-17. They outscored us 27-12 again in that third quarter. So again, not held them to 2 points again, like we did at up in Mackey, but 27-12 again, just exploding in that third quarter. And there we were led by Mackenzie Holmes with 20, and we had 5 people in double digits. So again, 83 points that we put up and held them to 60. So showing that we were good on both sides of the ball. The other thing then that was important that happened that week was that Iowa got beat by, just a little bit by Maryland. And
that came on the Tuesday after.
Yeah. Yes. Right after that. Game was on a Sunday. Then that Tuesday, Iowa gets beat on the road at Maryland. And that ended up sealing the conference outright for us, which leads us then into the next game, which I actually went to with my husband up in Iowa City. Iowa was ranked number 6 at the time. And that was an interesting one because actually Iowa game, or ESPN's Game Day was at that game. So it was, obviously hype. They changed it from ESPN2 to ESPN regular. They changed the game time of it so it could fit into that schedule. So there was definitely a lot of eyeballs on this game for sure. And I think it ended up being one of the most watched on TV as well, in addition to the first Indiana-Iowa game earlier in the year. So in that game, we ended up losing, as we know, on a buzzer beater. And the thing that I remember, of course, for those of you on TV, you just can't I can't express how much that atmosphere had to make some kind of a difference. But
Oh yeah.
Iowa's definitely playing for a little bit more than we did too, and we still gave them quite the run. I mean, it took a buzzer beater from Caitlin Clark, and I still think if the women's rules were different in terms of advancing the ball with a timeout, I don't think they win that game because they only had a second and a half left. So they don't win that game without that rule. Or if Chloe Moore McNeil doesn't fall down or whatever. There's a lot of ifs in that game. But, overall, I thought they battled in that game. And that's because they felt like they were, I mean, I think they were playing from behind almost the entire game. And that just showed that the women didn't care that there was, quote unquote, nothing for them to play for, right? Because that's what so many people are saying. They wanted to win that game. They didn't care if there was, no number one seed on the line or conference title anymore. They still wanted to go in and win that game, and that competitive spirit was still there. So that's kind of my take on that game. What do you remember from it?
Just a great game. I mean, it was the game we all thought when we saw the schedule come out and we talked during the preseason, it was everything except the fact that Iowa couldn't get a share. I mean, it was everything the Big Ten had hoped for. They were hoping for that to be the last game of the last day of the season with the two best teams possibly in the league playing for the conference title. And that part didn't play out, but the two best teams, at least the 1 and 2 seeds in the tournament, played out to where those two teams played one heck of a game in front of a national TV audience. And they just, they made one more play. I mean, it just is the way it turned out. But like you said, it was one of those that just really was, it felt like a heartbreaker just because of how much they had battled all day long. As you said, kind of battle from behind, get back into a tie, maybe get a small lead. Iowa would take another run. We battled back and just kept battling back. And finally we got the lead at the end and thought, oh man, we're going to get out of here. We're going to get out of here with this win. But I think it was also one of those, Kathy, and we talked a lot about this during the season, and we talked a lot about it, in the preseason, that we got to that point and all of a sudden, I shouldn't say all of a sudden, but it was a game where we really only played 6 players. Sarah played 22 minutes or 21 plus minutes. And then everybody else, the starters all played 33 or more.
Only Lily played the other person off the bench. Yeah.
And Lily played 3 minutes. I mean, so it was one of those where I felt like it kind of looking back, it's kind of like, I wish we still kept giving, gone a little bit farther into our 8th and 9th, get Bargesser a few minutes, get Meister a few more minutes, maybe get a Sandvik another minute or so. I mean, it concerned me that all of a sudden we were back to a 6-player rotation. And I just was, that was one of those that we talked about in the preseason. We just had to be able to play with a little more depth. And I'm not saying it cost us that game, but it's something we saw as we kept going on through the next set of games.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue. Let's go ahead and jump into postseason play. So after that, we get into a Big Ten tournament where we're matched up with number 9 seed in the tournament, Michigan State. We win that game 94-85. That just game felt like a struggle to me. Again, like kind of similar to the first game. We ended up winning, again, 94-85, but I think it just, the defense to me wasn't what we had come to see from them. And that was also the game. I think we got quite a bit banged up as well. Mackenzie got hurt in that game. I think that hurt us the rest of the year. Chloe Moore McNeil hurt her finger in that game. And it was just a really rough and physical game. And to your point earlier, I think it just showed again, we struggled with some of their more athletic guards that they had, specifically McDaniel, who ended up with 32 points in that game.
Yeah, and then also is the game where Keandra got hurt. She only played 13 seconds, got hurt, suffered a season-ending injury, basically. And again, had battled injuries, all year long. But yeah, the defense, they were lucky they were only down 6 at the half. It was 40-34 at the half, and they were lucky it was that close. It was, and I think we all kind of felt coming into that in the post-game show, like, whoa, I mean, we'd been off, but Michigan State played the day before. And I am a big believer. Sometimes that bye isn't always helpful. I'm not one to say, I'm not saying I want to play 5 games to win the Big Ten tournament, but sometimes when you've played a game and you kind of get a roll, you saw this with Penn State's Mitt on the men's side. They played and they just kind of felt that, they got on a roll. But we finally got locked in a little bit better in the second half, but we still gave up 27 points in the fourth quarter. We scored 35. I mean, that fourth quarter was, it was a fast-paced fourth quarter. But Yeah, that giving up 85 was an alarming number to a lot of
Yes.
us who had followed this team all year long.
Yeah. So with that win, that got us to the next day of the Big Ten tournament, to the semifinals, where we took on Ohio State 79-75. I think that's another hard one for us to forget, because we came out in that first half and we're up 46 to 26 in that half, right? And at one point we were up, I think, by even more, 13, 14, 15 points. And Ohio State came out and just started pressing the lights out of it. And it just really seemed like we weren't prepared for that. We didn't know how to handle it. And Ohio State just really turned us down. I think we were turning it over left and right in that second half. We ended up with 18 turnovers. I don't remember how many in each half, but it was a lot in that second half. It was really, that was the name of the game for me when I was watching it, is that press that just seemed to surprise us, and we just couldn't handle it. Really a tale of two halves in that, because that first half we handled Ohio State absolutely beautifully, and then second half we just fell apart.
Yeah, and gave up 53 points in the second half. A lot of it because of the defensive pressure. They got 21 points off turnovers. They got 40 points in the paint. They had 20 points on second chance. It was really the first game where we saw Mac was not 100%. And that became a concern, that was there something more seriously wrong? She played 29 minutes, but she only had 12 and 5. I say only, but just because we'd gotten used to Mackenzie Holmes giving us way more than that. But and so I thought that played a role. Just turned it over against the pressure. And we made some really bad decision making against the press. We dribbled into the sideline. We would dribble into a corner. We would leave ball handlers. We didn't run people to the middle. I mean, just things that I thought would have been simple things we could have fixed. And it was just like we panicked. And even Grace had a couple of really bad turnovers in that game. And they, I think one of them was where she tried to throw a pass length of the floor. And I thought the idea was good, but she sailed it. I mean, it was open. Right. She just sailed it out of bounds. And, but she also had 20 points and 5 rebounds and 6 assists. So, but we just, and that's what I was talking about earlier. And we saw this in the tournament, when Ohio State can get on a run and when they can score and set up the press. And when you can score off the press and that gets you right back into it, it just becomes a psychological thing. And you'd like to think that a experienced team like we had wouldn't have that problem, but it just really was. I mean, it was one of those that we really just got behind in the second half with it. And like I said, it snowballed, and it's just one of those things that happens. And Ohio State, with a healthy JC Sheldon, she only played 16 minutes that day, but she had 12 points and 4 steals. And so that to me was a huge difference. And the Terry girl had 19 points and 12 rebounds. I mean, she was just and 8 of those were offensive rebounds. We got out. That was the other big thing. We got out rebound. Well, we ended up out rebound them, but they had 13 offensive rebounds. So
yeah. All right, well, let's move on to the NCAA tournament then. So we opened up NCAA tournament against Tennessee Tech. I thought we handled that one very easily. We won that one 77-47. So I don't really have a whole lot to talk about. Thought we could just jump ahead to the Miami game. But did you have anything on the Tennessee Tech game you wanted to rehash?
Well, I won't rehash it, but I think we were all very concerned when Mac didn't play. And that they were holding her out for precautionary reasons, because she'd already been resting basically for 2 weeks. They hadn't played since the Big Ten tournament 2 weeks before that. So I think we were all really kind of, at that point, really got concerned about Mac's health. And I think that came to show in the first half against Miami. She did not play nearly as well in that first half as she ended up playing in the second half. I think she, to a certain degree, in the second half, she was just like, heck with it. I'm just going to play through whatever pain I have. And she ends up with 22 and 9. But we dug ourselves such, we were down 12, if I'm doing my math right. Yeah, we're down 12 at the half. Yeah. And so we just really dug in. And I will say this, sometimes it's about matchups. And I think, in hindsight, I think the ACC was a little bit underseeded in a whole. I mean, Louisville ends up in the final 8. Notre Dame got the Sweet 16 without their best player. North Carolina, basically played to their seed level and such. And Miami overplayed a little bit, but I think they were underseeded a little bit. And as a whole, I think maybe the ACC was underseeded a little bit. And it's about matchups. And they were athletic. They were physical. and we really struggle to contain, again, athletic guards who could do something off the bounce.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't really have anything else, Jeff, I guess, around the NCAA tournament, but anything as a whole we haven't covered on the season that you want to touch on, and kind of maybe we can jump into our last thoughts from this point.
No, not really. I just, I'm not going to say I'm rooting for Iowa, but obviously a Big Ten team winning would help a little bit with the image of the league. And as we saw, Indiana won a very tough league. And I think we need to remember that even though it was a disappointing end in the loss to Miami, if we're going to be a team that's consistently a top 5, top 10 team, we're going to get back to that point. And we're going to get back to that point, hopefully multiple times in a row, and you're going to bust through there. But you're also going to have some years where you just kind of get that disappointing finish, and it just one night. I mean, if we played them another night, it might have been different. But like I said, I think it was more about matchups, and I am looking forward. I really think that South Carolina Iowa game almost really ends up being. Oh, I forgot about Virginia Tech. And we're talking about the ACC. Virginia Tech won the league, and they're in the Final Four. So, but I really think that South Carolina Iowa game's really kind of the de facto national championship game.
Yeah, I do too. And no, I will not be cheering for Iowa. I hear enough of them being in Des Moines. I don't need to hear any more about it. I think the Big Ten had a great showing. They had 3 out of the 8 in the Elite 8. That's enough for me. And we don't need to go any farther. But no, back to us though, because this is about recapping our women's game. And again, I just want to reiterate our women's team rather. I want to reiterate to everyone listening live or later, don't again take that Miami loss or how it feels like we finished the season, a rough game against Michigan State, the loss to Ohio State, the loss to Miami, the buzzer beater by Iowa. You need to look at the season as a whole, and it is a 28-4 record, 28-4. We broke all kinds of records. We broke attendance records. We broke viewership records on television. Coach Morin broke records from a coaching standpoint. We had players breaking records, and this is just the beginning. I think this is something that we'll be able to springboard into next year. And I hope anyway that Miami loss will light a fire in their bellies for next year too. Right? We have a lot of the players coming back. We'll have future shows that will delve into who's coming back, the implications for that, who we might need to plug into some of those open holes that we have, and find out once we hear more about the transfer portal. But I just want everyone to remember as a whole, the season was an amazing season, and just looking back now on all of those games and kind of recapping, they were a lot of fun. They were a lot of joy to watch. So that's kind of my final thoughts, Jeff. But what for you? What do you have?
Well, I want to second that. And I also want to say that when you think about it, sometimes when you're a really good team, you maybe play your best basketball early in the season and you still win games throughout the rest of the season. Or sometimes you play your best in the middle of the season and you still win games at the other parts of the season, but you really aren't playing your best. And then there are other teams who are really good, who find it at the end of the season, that last month, that last 6 weeks, and all of a sudden they're making that, they're winning their league, they're winning their conference, they're going to, deep in the tournament. And you're thinking, wow, what a year. For us, it was kind of the first part. And we played well for really the first 3-4 months of the season, November, December, January, most of February. I don't want to say fatigue. I'm not going to try and use that as a reason, but I do think that we lost our A game at the end of the season. And it wasn't so, and I don't want to blame it on any one game. It wasn't Iowa. It wasn't Michigan State. It wasn't Ohio State. But as a coach, you can't even explain it. Just all of a sudden, you've played so well throughout the course of a year. And all of a sudden you go to your B game, or sometimes maybe in your C+ game, and you may still find a way to win, but it's going to catch up to you. And I thought that's what kind of happened in the Ohio State game, especially once that second half got kind of going the way it did. And I think Miami was that. I'm not saying we played terribly. We didn't play an F game. We just didn't have our A game like we'd had for the first 30-some games of the year. And that just happens. And when we do that, and when you're in that kind of, let's face it, we lost in the second round. I get that. but there are going to be 67 other teams all wondering why they didn't win a national title either. So, you know, so
there's only one.
Be happy with what they've done, and be happy with the fact that Terry Morin is continuing to build a program, not kind of a one-hit wonder.
Right. And, that's a good thing to remind us all of as well, that while we had big expectations and thinking we had the caliber, and we do, to reach the Final Four, this team, this program is still learning that, right? They're still learning about success in the postseason. And, it's not like we're not a UConn or a Tennessee or a South Carolina who've had this kind of success year after year. We'll learn from it. So I think a lot of these players are coming back next year, and we'll learn from it. So let's move on then. We'll talk about real quick some programming notes. I already did last call, so I kind of jumped around here. So programming notes, Jeff is keeping us updated about all of our Hoosier alumni out in the community. The ones the Hoosier alums that are playing pro basketball. You can find that in our private community if you're part of that, or you can find it on our Twitter feed. You can follow us at Twitter by searching for Doing the Work. You can also check out our Assembly Call community page by going to assemblycall.com. Also, if you don't already subscribe to our Crimson Cast, also part of our Back Home Network. And you can also look for the Hoosier Morning After podcast that covers another take on men's basketball there as well. Jeff and I are still looking for sure for our next show, but we're tentatively thinking that we'll do one 2 weeks from today at the same time on April 12th. And that's kind of what we have coming up. So anything else, Jeff, it's last on your mind before we send us out of here?
First of all, talking about the pros, the alums, the Lithuanian League, Tyra Buss's season is done. They've already started their playoffs, and they got knocked out in the first round. Quirky, it kind of like the soccer method over there with some of those leagues. They actually went 1-1 in the 2-game series, but they got bailed out on aggregate score, or on point differential. So they lost in the first round. They didn't move on. Amanda Cahill's team is playing in the Luxembourg playoffs right now. They were up 1-0 and we're playing today, I believe, but I did not see a result from that game. The Spanish league with Alexa and Nicole is still going, and they still got a couple more weeks from what I can tell. But it looks like Lex's team is going to make the playoffs over there, and Nikki's team is just going to kind of be in that dead zone, I guess. Well, if you follow European soccer, there's teams at the top that make the playoffs or get advanced to the next level. Teams in the middle kind of get nothing, and then you got your teams at the bottom to get relegated. And they have kind of the same thing in those women's leagues over there as well for the basketball. And then Jory Davis's team has really struggled over in Italy, and she's seen some of her playing time go down here in the last 3-4 weeks. But so yeah, I've been trying to keep everybody updated, but those seasons are pretty quickly coming to a close over there in Europe. Because a lot of those players will come back here for the WNBA season. Not all, but some, I should say, of those players overseas will come back for the WNBA season. So that's why they'll start shutting down by the end of March, middle April.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, well, we've been going here for over an hour, so I think we'll wrap it up then. So if you do want to see us do the show live and be part of our live chat, you can subscribe to us at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can also be part of our private community and join at assemblycall.com/community. A special thanks to John Ringer of Riggs Design for designing our new logo. A big thank you to Bob Thompson for our new music that you heard earlier in the broadcast. And most of all, thank you all for those listening both live and after the fact. We're here for you, and we do this not just for Jeff and I to yap at each other. So we're really happy to have you all listening, and we will be back to talk IU hoops again with you soon. But until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers.
All right. Hey, for our listeners, if they didn't see it earlier today, there was an emergency assembly call podcast because of Peyton Sparks committing out of the portal. So if any of you want to catch up on that emergency podcast with Jared and Coach Tom Sony, that was earlier today. I happened to watch most of it live. So, but yeah, good show. And thanks everybody for being here again, and expect us to be here on Wednesdays. Wednesday's probably the best day.
Most likely.
For us to do this.
All right, Jeff, I think I need to get out of here. So we'll say goodnight to everyone and
Yep.
we'll talk again in a couple weeks. So good night, everyone.
See you, everybody.